don't write checks. How do you pay these guys?
Straight cash, homie.
Leo the Lions, like now I go by the lineup. And if you can't make your mind up, I know you know where to find us. So don't go by blind luck, you should probably subscribe. Click play, kick back, chill, and watch it all live. Welcome. I am Leo, and this is in fact Leo the Lineup. I appreciate you if you are in fact returning. If you are new, hit me with a like and a subscribe. I am extremely new to this, so a little goes a long way in that regards. This video is being recorded on a Tuesday. Hopefully you had a good Monday Night Football experience. The game pretty much went how it was panned out to go until the end, with Lamar Jackson coming out of the tunnel like Superman, saving the day for the Ravens. I believe I threw out two pretty good sleeper options in Kareem Hunt and Gus Edwards, both having really good games. I believe Kareem Hunt was in the first place lineup MVP slot. Might want to take a look at that and check me out. Now I'll just throw out a couple maybe contrarian DK MVP options. You could go with Jarvis Landry. We all know that Kareem Hunt could be sneaky. People might not assume that he gets as much work as he does. On the other side, I like Gus Edwards as a sneaky MVP spot. I am right sometimes, but nonetheless, this video is recorded on a Tuesday for a Thursday night matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas, remember Las Vegas now, Raiders. A rematch of Week 9 where the Raiders pulled it off, but the Chargers put up fantasy points because like they've been doing it all year. Trailing just enough to keep throwing and keep being aggressive. So without further ado, let's just get into it. All right, first I'm going to start off with the Los Angeles Chargers. In my opinion, the more attractive fantasy option. Certainly worth noting that this matchup comes a week after the Raiders gave up 44 points to the Indianapolis Colts and fired their defensive coordinator after. Therefore, the defense seems super shaky, and it's uncertain how they're going to perform with a new man in charge. So keep that in mind when you're picking which Chargers you want to play. And we'll just get right into it with the Chargers, starting with Justin Herbert, the overlooked quarterback of the last draft. I believe he was the third choice. A lot of scrutiny. A lot of people questioned whether he would adapt. And honestly, he's been the best of the three, no doubt. He had 7 weeks in a row with 20 fantasy points or more. Weeks 4 through 11. His ceiling game hit 38 points. He has slowed recently in the last 3 weeks. However, he still throws a ton. He put up 23 fantasy points against the Las Vegas Raiders last time they played, so certainly going to be an MVP possibility and the stronger of the quarterback options. Justin Herbert a couple weeks ago versus New England, you might remember they got their ass kicked, and hopefully this threw people off of him a little bit. He still put up a modest 16 points last week with 243 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm looking for him to get back into his 20-point plus ways and have his way with this beaten defense. Another positive with Justin Herbert is he has thrown the ball 42 times or more in 7 of his last 8 games. Obviously, the more attempts, the more chances you have to succeed. Duh. To sum it up, this kid's averaging over 40 attempts a game, 285 yards and 2 touchdowns a week on the year. And plus he's going up against the defense, like I said, that just fired their defensive coordinator. I'm liking me some Justin Herbert. And then there's Keenan Allen, wide receiver, 11,000 on Draftkings, 14,000 on Fanduel. He ain't the Cookie Monster. This ain't Sesame Street. This man is the target monster. He has seen target highs of 19 in 2 weeks this year, 2 different times. He's averaged 11 targets a game overall in the season, and the last time he played Las Vegas, the man put up 26 points. He's going to be the generic stack and pairing with Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert loves him as well as Austin Eckler, who I will get into next. Austin Eckler, my man's missed a couple weeks on IR and came back with a lot of volume. He's averaged 11 targets a game since returning from IR, so the carries are just the cherry on the top. He hasn't scored a touchdown, however, the volume as far as receptions and overall yards total has let him score more than 22 points a week twice out of 3 weeks. So Austin Eckler, he is questionable technically, as are a few of these players in this matchup because it's a Thursday quick turnaround. However, I like me some Austin Eckler as well, and he actually pairs nicely with Justin Herbert more than traditional running backs because of he is almost like a wide receiver running back. hybrid. So there you go, Austin Eckler. Then you got my man Mike Williams. Got hurt right away this week. Partially kicked me out of the playoffs and season long. However, he's questionable. Keep that in mind. Stay up to date on the news. He's 6,200 on DraftKings, 10,000 on FanDuel. He is a highly volatile player, an all-or-nothing type player. He's either going to get you over 20 or under 10. He has had a decent amount of targets, and he is a deep threat for Justin Herbert. However, you can't count on him for shit. Stay up to news on whether he's going to play or not when you're considering Mike Williams. This leads me into yet another man questionable on the quick Sunday to Thursday turnaround. Tight end Hunter Henry. He's 5,800 on DraftKings, 10,000 on FanDuel. Like I said, he's questionable, so stay up with the news. However, he is averaging nearly 7 targets in his last 6 games, putting up around 9-10 points, but the ceiling is about 15. So he's not the most explosive player in the world, but he could be a little different build off of Keenan Allen. I just don't really like the price tag for the inconsistency and low fantasy output. Then my man Tyron Johnson, who most of you probably don't even know is a real person. He's a wide receiver, 5,000 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. He filled in directly for Mike Williams when he left last week. He was targeted 7 times for 55 yards and a touchdown. However, if you look at his game log, he has barely played all season long. So unless Mike Williams doesn't play and somehow Guyton falls back behind Johnson, I'm not looking to get to this guy, even though he had a nice game, all because Mike Williams missed last week after a few plays. This brings me to the kicker, Michael Bagley. He's 3,800 on DraftKings, 9,000 on FanDuel. Not a priority for me. He's a relatively low-scoring kicker. In fact, he put up -2 fantasy points 2 weeks ago. LOL. This game has shootout vibes written all over it, so temper expectations when rostering kickers. However, they always are a wild card. Now you got the defense of the Chargers. 3,400 on DraftKings, not applicable on FanDuel. Derek Carr has thrown 5 interceptions in his last 4 games. 2 coming off last week against Indy. However, like I said, I feel like this game might have shootout vibes, so I'm not looking to get to defense unless I absolutely have to. Short and sweet. Jalen Guyton is a guy to keep your eye on if Mike Williams misses this game. I know it seems Tyron Johnson kind of took Mike Williams' workload. However, Guyton still gets his snap percentage of 83% the last 4 games, regardless of if Williams is in or not. So if Williams is out, you figure that he has to be boosted. He looks like a nice play, especially at that price tag. So if Mike Williams misses, I am elevating Jalen Guyton considerably. Then there's Mr. Kalin Bellage, running back, 2,400 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. You might remember this guy. He had a nice output right before Eckler came back from the IR. However, he's still averaging 7 attempts, 2 targets the last 2 games he's played with Eckler. I would temper expectations with this guy. Keep your eye on the Austin Eckler news. He's questionable. I assume he's going to play. However, if he doesn't, Kalin Bellage is a smash play at 2,400 and is going to be a nice value just like Booker on the other end. Justin Jackson, 2,000 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel, 15% of snaps last week, coming off injury, seems to be behind Kalin Bellage and obviously Austin Eckler. I'm just not going to get there unless he's a punt play for you and trying to get lucky. Joshua Kelly, nah, bruh. Leading things off for the Las Vegas Raiders, we have Derek Carr. A guy, even with that broken leg of a couple years ago, is actually surviving the NFL unlike his brother David, who was sacked to death, and that's not a gay innuendo. He's 10,000 on DraftKings, 15,000 on FanDuel. He's coming off 13 fantasy points week 9 against the Chargers. He had negative 1.4 fantasy points 3 weeks ago against a weak Atlanta defense. However, he's averaging 29 fantasy points in his last 2 weeks. One was against the Jets. The next was a better defense in the Colts where they were getting their ass kicked because their defense was terrible, allowing, like I said, 44 points to the Colts. They had to throw a ton. But Derek Carr, nonetheless, coming off 2 weeks, averaging 30 fantasy points. And like Batman and Robin, I'm not sure who's Batman or who's Robin in this instance. I think we know it's Darren Waller, but nonetheless, if you're thinking Derek Carr, you are thinking Darren Waller, tight end, 9,400 on DraftKings, 12,000 on FanDuel. These are his last 2 games. 17 targets, 13 receptions, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 45 fantasy points against the weak New York Jets. Next week, tougher defense, still targeted 10 times, 7 points off receptions with 7 receptions, and 75 yards. If he found the end zone, it would be a stellar game. However, with the points off receptions and the yards points, he was still able to put up a nice output. If you're thinking Derek Carr, you are going to want to smash Darren Waller. This leads me to Josh Jacobs, the man who trolled his own fantasy owners on his IG Live about an hour prior to kickoff, saying he wasn't going to play. When he did, we probably should have taken that advice. He only played 42% of snaps and put up a dud. He's coming in at 8,800 on DraftKings, 13,000 on FanDuel. He's questionable, coming off the quick turnaround. He was already kind of limited last week. Focus on the news with this guy, because if he is somehow out, Devontae Booker is a smash spot at that price tag and is probably the best points per dollar on the entire slate. So focus your news on Josh Jacobs. Like all the other guys questionable, you're going to have to pay a little extra attention this week. Nelson Aguilar, another player Philadelphia fans love to hate. Wide receiver, 7,400 on DraftKings, 10,500 on FanDuel. Since Week 11, he's averaging nearly 9 targets a game. He's certainly established himself as the number 2 option behind Darren Waller for Derek Carr. To sum it up short and sweet, if he can actually get his hands on it and continue to catch like he has been, he's certainly live for a long score. Gotta like me some Nelson Aguilar. Henry Ruggs III, yet another wide receiver that these GMs thought would be a better prospect than Justin Jefferson. Gotta love it. He's a wide receiver, 5,200, 8,000 on FanDuel. He's only surpassed 10 fantasy points in just one of his last 8 games. He's always going to be live for a random deep touchdown if he can haul it in. He's barely targeted. They're going to Nelson Aguilar and Darren Waller when they're not running the ball. Henry Ruggs is going to be a punt play for sure. Then we go to Mr. Hunter Renfrow. We're not talking about the Tampa Bay Rays designated hitter. We're talking about a wide receiver. He's 4,800 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel. He's averaging 63% of snaps his last 3 games, and surprisingly 7 targets in those 3 games. However, you got to temper your expectations because he's only averaged about 9.6 fantasy points a game. Certainly playable at this price. Certainly playable at that price. But like I said, temper expectations for sure. Mr. Daniel Carlson, a surprising draft pick kicker from my Minnesota Vikings. They gave him the axe after a couple weeks where he was an absolute mess. However, he's turned his career around with the Raiders and looks like a great kicker. Not a great fantasy kicker, though. He scored just between 6 and 9 points in his last 4 games. I think this game might be a shootout, so unless it's low scoring, I'm not really forcing myself Daniel Carlson. Raiders defense, it's actually kind of laughable to talk about them, but it's fantasy football, so you have to because you never know what's going to happen. They're coming in at an even 3,000 on DraftKings and not applicable on FanDuel. Herbert has turned it over in 3 straight games, but this defense is terrible. They just fired their defensive coordinator, and they just allowed 44 points to the Colts. I think the Chargers can put up a lot of points on them. I'm not really getting there. Now things are definitely heating up. We got Devontae Booker, running back, 1,800 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. This is a smash spot if Josh Jacobs is banged up and can't play. Best points per dollar play on the slate, like I mentioned. Keep your eyes on Josh Jacobs' news because if he's out, you're going to look to Booker and Jalen Richard. Jalen Richard and Devontae Booker kind of go hand in hand when deciding who to roster. You got to keep your eyes on the Josh Jacobs news. If he's out, both are playable. Devontae Booker is going to be the generic route to go, but Jalen Richard could surprise and actually take over the backfield if Jacobs misses. So keep in mind Jalen Richard. This brings me to Foster Moro, tight end, 1,000 flat on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. This guy barely plays. He was targeted 3 total times in the last 9 games. Nah, fam. This brings me to Zay Jones, and disregard the notes on him because that's not accurate. For some reason, my Excel copy and pasted Hunter Renfrow's stats over Zay Jones. Zay Jones has not been playing. He has not been targeted, and he is not a guy I'm looking for in any way, shape, or form. Disregard the 63% of snaps, the blah, 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 blah. That is for Hunter Renfrow. Just realizing that Zay Jones, not playable for me. Then you got Bryan Edwards, wide receiver, 400 on DraftKings, 6,000 on Fanduel, averaging less than 15% of snaps per game recently. He was actually a starter going into the year, surprisingly, until Nelson Aguilar kind of established himself as the veteran that he is. But yeah, he's only averaging 15% of snaps, not targeted. However, 15% of snaps could mean one target. If that one target is a touchdown, could be playable, but I expect this to be a higher scoring game, so not necessary. Alec Ingold, fullback, running back, 200 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel. Now, you may remember from Week 2, Showdown, Raiders, New Orleans Saints, this guy actually scored a touchdown. Like I said with the other people, unless this is a super low-scoring game, you're probably not going to need him, but that is interesting nonetheless. To wrap up the Raiders, and it's going to seem Cowboys, you'll see in a second, but the Raiders, Jason Witten, tight end, $200 on DraftKings, $5,500 on FanDuel. I put in the notes, unless you're a Cowboys fan who still loves Jason Witten, nah. So, not getting there, barely plays, barely is targeted. The target volume is really condensed between Waller, Aguilar, and a little Renfro sprinkled into the mix, but he's not dependable, so that'll pretty much sum up this video. I just wanted to give a quick and precise breakdown of how things are looking as of Tuesday evening. That's how it shakes for me, and until next time, appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to like or subscribe if this was at all beneficial to you, and until next time, peace out, guys.